Well, guys, we just reached a milestone. This whole video is over 30 minutes long, which is the longest thing I've ever recorded. It took a while to edit. I know it's going to take even longer to put music to, but hey, it's going to be worth it. I know that. Thank you, Maria Karina, for letting me read this. Man, I should have just done 5 through 7. I shouldn't have done 5 through 8. I probably could have saved myself a good 10 minutes, maybe. But anyway, so here are the next 4 chapters. I hope you enjoy. Of course, music will be in the description down below. The original story will be in the description down below. Social media for Maria Karina will also be in the description down below. And here we go.
Lucinda and Lawrence? Uh-huh. Kawaii-chan was texting Lucinda-chan before the power went out. She said that she had Lawrence-kun over to help her with a potion that required an extra set of hands. A voice sounded from a small corner in the room. Zane was huddled in a ball on his phone, the brightness down to the lowest settings. Why did Lucinda ask Lawrence of all people? Kawaii-chan doesn't know. She didn't say. But Lucinda-chan texted me a bit ago saying that they were both trapped inside, so that should be eventful. Zane drew out his sighs, clearly annoyed by the sounds of the ladies gossiping. Oh yeah, Lucy, get it? Aphmau punched the air, clearly excited over the news. Kawaii-chan ships it! The pink-haired girl's hair bounced up and down as she did, even more excited than Aphmau. Zane spoke, louder and longer this time, desperate to not be forgotten in the corner. Aphmau turned to him, almost as annoyed as he was. Zane, I get you don't want to come over here and gossip with us, but you don't have to be a jerk about it. Yeah, Kawaii-chan agreed. And isn't your phone going to die soon? Don't you want to save the battery, Zane-kun? What I do with my phone is none of your business, Missy. Kawaii-chan turned and leaned against the wall, knees pressed up against her chest. She fiddled with something in her hands. What do you two even do anyways? The only thing you have in common is ponies. Kawaii-chan doesn't even see how you could be friends. There was an awkward silence that blanketed the room. No one wanted to leave the conversation at that, but no one knew what to say. Aphmau sighed. I guess we just like each other's company? It's hard to explain. They sat in silence for a bit, tension building in the air. No one knew what to say or do next, and so the trio sat listening to the rain. Then the light coming from the corner dimmed, until it was completely gone. Dang it, my phone died! Aphmau and Kawaii-chan laughed and Zane fumed. What? Zane, we told you ages ago to save your battery, but you wouldn't listen. This, she gestured to Zane's phone, which he tossed to the ground, is your punishment. Ugh. Zane threw himself to the ground in agony. Now what are we supposed to do? He said, muffled. Ooh! Kawaii-chan clapped as she jumped up. She dropped whatever was in her hands, but she didn't notice. Why don't we play Truth or Dare? No, Zane snapped at her. We are not becoming the cliché. At least not while I'm here. Besides, Aphmau started, we don't really have enough people to play. Then what do we do now, Aphmau-senpai? I don't know, she replied, then laid down on the sleeping bags and stared at the ceiling for a while. The next couple of hours were spent that way, in silence, no one knowing what to do or say at that time. The rain kept pouring, patting on the roof, making the silence comfortable instead of awkward. One thing was for sure, though. The trio was awestruck by the immense chaos occurring outside. The streets were becoming a river due to the copious waters pouring from the sky. Trees were being uprooted from the ground. Houses were being flooded. The basement of their house was flooded now, with no hope of saving it. Kawaii-chan had cleared out her shipping shrine as soon as she saw the first drop of water. And now, even the main floor was getting wet, forcing the group to migrate upstairs to Aphmau's room. The 3 did all they could to block the water, but there was no hope. The house was completely flooded. Aphmau-senpai, do you think Caitlin-sama's okay? Kawaii-chan, who was sitting by the window, asked. Kawaii-chan knows that the guy's house doesn't have a second floor, so, Kawaii-chan can't help but worry. Kawaii-chan, Caitlin will be fine. I texted her and I'm sure she'll reply soon. Don't worry. Aphmau sat down on her bed, cuddling her plush husky. She looked down at Zane and chuckled. He was curled up asleep in the pink sleeping bags, with disheveled hair and his mask around his neck. It had fallen off in his slumber. Kawaii-chan looked over as she heard Aph laugh and blushed. Then she bounded over, curious. I didn't know Zane-kun had freckles. Kawaii-chan turned and sat up on the edge of her bed. He likes to hide them. Doesn't like how they make him look. Kawaii-chan crouched down in front of him, her face just inches away from his. Aphmau smiled knowingly. What are you thinking? Kawaii-chan blushed and sat down, not replying, though under her breath she spoke to herself, barely audible. Cute. He looks cute. The night just seemed to keep dragging on, and the trio had all fallen asleep, tired from staying up so late. Aphmau had fallen asleep in her bed, of course, cuddling with her stuffed husky. Zane, though, wanted to be a jerk and took all the sleeping bags and unzipped them, using them as blankets. So, Kawaii-chan was left to figure her own sleeping situation. She figured going to her room was out of the question. She got scared during thunderstorms, and she really didn't want to be alone. She also didn't want to climb in bed with Aphmau due to the fact that she kicks in her sleep. So, that left the floor next to Zane. She had tried getting one of the blankets off of him, but he had wrapped himself into a cocoon, and taking a blanket from him was next to impossible. She ended up falling asleep trying, and flopped down next to him. Zane fluttered his eyes open drearily as he woke up from a heavy slumber, simply to squeeze them tight moments later when he got a glimpse of the sun. Irene, I hate mornings, Zane thought as he adjusted himself slightly. His back hurt like hell, and as he became a bit more aware as he woke, he realized he was on the floor. Why am I on the floor? He opened his eyes and saw a ton of pink. That's cool, I guess, he thought. Pink's my favorite color, after all, though I don't tell anyone. He shut his eyes again. It was a nice pink, too, he thought. Like the color of Pinky Cake, though there were some hints of a lighter pink, like the color of Kawaii-chan's hair. That's a nice pink. Zane, in his delirium, felt a tickle under his nose and went to scratch it when he felt something soft. And then he heard a tiny moan. Zane tensed, frozen in place. His eyes shot open immediately as he tried to identify the foreign sound. He felt something press into him, and it started purring. Zane looked down. There, laying on top of the poor boy, was Kawaii-chan. She was resting on top of the heavy sleeping bags that engulfed him, though she had wriggled her way slightly into one. They weren't really touching, both being separated by the blankets, but nothing Zane had ever experienced before, and this felt kinda intimate. She was laying on top of him, her foot resting along his inner calf, and her hand was pressed against his chest. Zane's hand, though, rested on top of her head, almost petting the area right next to her fuzzy kitten ears. He didn't dare move, too risky. Wait, how did she even get on top of me in the first place? Zane thought. Did she just accidentally climb on me in her sleep? What if she deliberately climbed on top of me? What if she wakes up? What is she gonna say? His brain was running a mile a minute, so fast that he was hardly processing his own questions. Then he heard footsteps and was thrown into utter panic. Hey Zane, you're awake! Aphmau called and hopped over to be standing above the flustered boy. She slyly smiled when she saw Kawaii-chan. What's going on here? She smiled. She was smug. Zane didn't like it. Get this thing off me! Zane spoke through gritted teeth, while Aphmau laughed. He didn't understand. What was so funny about this? Then he heard a groan. Kawaii-chan shifted a bit, then sat up and yawned. Her hair was a mess and her eyes were closed, so she didn't even realize how she had fallen asleep. Zane scrunched himself into a ball and threw the blankets away from him, wanting to get as far away from Kawaii-chan as possible, though it backfired. A sleeping bag flew directly at her face, causing her to immediately perk up. Owie! The girl threw the fabric beside her as she tried to figure out who she was and what year it was, or at least that's probably how she felt after waking up like that. Kawaii-chan, are you okay? The zipper hit you in the face. Aphmau-senpai? She blinked and brushed her hair out of her eyes. She looked around, clearly confused as to why she was sleeping on the floor, and as to why Zane was curled up in a ball on the opposite side of the room. She stared at him and blinked. Correction, We stared at each other for a moment until I turned my head and looked at the floor. Avoid eye contact, I thought to myself. Don't make things awkward. What's wrong with Zane-kun? She spoke softly, almost in a whisper, but I could tell it was directed toward Aphmau. Kawaii-chan, why don't we go talk in your room? Aphmau said, and I heard her help Kawaii-chan up. As they walked past me, I looked up. Kawaii-chan was holding onto Aphmau's arm as she guided her out the room. Kawaii-chan was staring at me, dazed. I looked away. When they were out of the door, I sighed in relief. It was way too awkward for me to handle. I shifted and looked at the pile of blankets, blushing. Then I heard Kawaii-chan's voice from down the hallway. Oh my Irene, look at downstairs! I jumped up and ran into the hallway to see Aphmau and Kawaii-chan standing at the top of the staircase. Aphmau laughed nervously. Yeah, I was gonna tell you. I looked down from the ledge and gasped. The entire place was in ruins, in a sopping wet mess. The sofa was on its back. The hardwood floors were bent from all the water, and there was no way that the TV could have even had a chance. I gasped. What the heck is Caitlin gonna say about this? It had been about 2 weeks since that night, and the entire street had been thrown into utter chaos. Not only did the group lose their homes, they lost most of their possessions that they couldn't get back. The city had forced them into living in a hotel for a while, at least until they could assess the damages and decide what to do. While in the hotel, the group found a new street to live on, Lover's Lane. Zane wasn't too fond of the name, but they couldn't move in yet. The group was eventually told that their entire street needed to be demolished, and that they had 1 day to get any salvageable items before the wrecking crew came. Unfortunately, only a few of them were able to come, since most of them were working that day. There, Aphmau spoke as she slammed the back of the moving van shut. Can we go back to the hotel now? We've been at this all day, Garth spoke. Yeah, I hate to complain, but this is some gruesome work. Can we please go take a nap? Caitlin agreed. Yeah, Caitlin, Travis flirted. Let's go take a nap together. No, guys, Aaron spoke before Caitlin could react. I know we're all tired, believe me. I could fall asleep in the middle of the road if I just lay down. But we need to finish this. We haven't even started the girls' house, and it's already getting dark. Come on, let's get going. The group sighed and walked over to Aphmau, Caitlin, and Kawaii-chan's house, while Aaron climbed into the front of the moving van to drive it there. Aphmau, though through tired eyes, kept a close watch on Zane. He was prone to try slipping away from the group when he got the chance, probably wanting to go back to the hotel and take a cat nap. Speaking of cats, has anyone seen Kawaii-chan? Caitlin looked around. She was just here a minute ago. While the rest of the group spoke with each other, confused, Zane just smiled while Aaron parked the moving van. As soon as he opened the door, Aphmau ran up to him and asked about KC. He didn't know anything, and Zane smiled as Aaron opened the moving van's door to find a purring Kawaii-chan sleeping on one of the packed mattresses. He had saw her when she slipped in there, looking like death. He was jealous of her cat-like stealth, knowing that if he had the ability, he wouldn't just take a nap in a moving van. No, sir, he would be out of there faster than you could call out his name. Kawaii-chan, Aphmau shook the poor girl. Wake up! Zane slipped out of sight of the van for a moment as the girl woke up. He wouldn't admit it, but he had been avoiding her since the night of the flood almost 2 weeks ago. Every time he heard she was going to be somewhere, he refused to go. When he saw her the few times he left the hotel room, he made sure not to make conversation, so much as eye contact was too horribly awkward for him to handle. So, he hid like the coward he was, just out of sight of the girl. He heard a yawn. Huh? Kawaii-chan, Aphmau started. I know you're tired, but we're almost done. We just have to clean our house out, and then we can go back to the hotel and sleep all we want. Kawaii-chan, although Aph made a pretty convincing argument, groaned and rolled over. At this point, Garth, Aaron, and Travis had started getting stuff from inside and bringing it to the yard. Caitlin sighed. Kawaii-chan, didn't you want to get your pink mass of a tree from your room? Caitlin questioned. Casey immediately shot up. Cherry blossom! She exclaimed, jumping up and sprinting into the house. Aphmau laughed. What is it with her and that tree? That's right. I haven't been roaming with us in the hotel. Oh, that's right. You haven't been roaming with us in the hotel. She's been having a lot of anxiety problems lately, and it has something to do with that tree. I don't know. Whenever she gets in a mood, she complains about how we couldn't come here and get the cherry blossom from her room. I think it calms her or something. She's been having it a lot worse since the flood. Man, I hope she's okay. I've always known she had slight anxiety, but I never thought anything like this. What do you think brought it on? I don't know. I can tell it's not new, though. There was silence for a moment between the girls. Everyone else was inside getting things, and now Zane was in a bit of a predicament. If he went inside, the girls would see him and think he was eavesdropping on a deeply personal conversation, which was exactly what he was doing, though it wasn't intentional. If he stayed here, he would be eavesdropping even more when he didn't want to either. Caitlin, Aphmau started, have you ever wondered why we don't know anything about Kawaii-chan's past? You know, her family? Now that you mention it, I do think it's a bit odd. We've known her for years, since high school. I wonder why she hasn't told us anything. Don't ask, Aphmau spoke quickly. If she's having trouble with anything, she can come to us. She knows it. More silence. Zane, now deeply uncomfortable, stood perfectly still, trying not to make a sound. He just needed a way to get out of there without the girl seeing him. Thankfully, Travis walked over with a box full of salvageable items. Hey, Caitlin, he spoke in a try-hard, flirty voice. Oh, Irene, Zane thought. Is there any way I could move these boxes into your heart? Zane cringed. It was so bad, but it was the perfect distraction. Caitlin, appalled, grabbed the box from the white-haired boy and stomped on his foot hard. Ow, what was that for? Travis grabbed his foot and hopped on the other one when he lost his balance and fell over. Zane ran over to the house as the girls laughed and helped him up. When he got inside, he breathed a heavy sigh of relief. He did not want to know what would have happened if he stayed out there. After regaining his composure, he looked around in shock. You could tell it had once been Aphmau's house, but it was a shell of its former self. The dank house smelled of something rotting. Furniture was upturned, miscellaneous items were strewn everywhere, and floorboards creaked as Zane walked from room to room. After a bit, he saw Aaron searching the kitchen. Oh, Zane, there you are. Garth and I can take care of this floor. Why don't you go help Kawaii-chan with the second floor? We're almost done down here. Zane scoffed. He was trying to avoid Kawaii-chan, not help her. What about the basement? Don't even try. The stairs broken, we can't get down there. Besides, I can't imagine that there would be anything salvageable down there anyways. Zane sighed, unable to think of a comeback. He started heading upstairs, figuring that he could still avoid the Mifa, even if they were on the same floor. That plan was immediately ruined when he walked into Aphmau's old room to find everything already packed up. His entire plan was to clean out Aphmau's room, as he was closest with her, but it seemed as if Aaron had cleaned it out before he had even gotten a chance into the house. He had even cleaned out the entire ensuite. Now, Zane had no idea what he was going to do. He couldn't clean Caitlin's room because she would snap his neck. He couldn't help out Kawaii-chan because of obvious reasons, and... Wait a second, the bathroom, he thought. Zane left Aphmau's room in a hurry, clearly proud of himself for coming up with such a brilliant idea. Though when he passed Kawaii-chan's room, he stopped himself. The door was open. Where is it? The Mifa groaned in frustration as she slammed her nightstand drawer shut. Her room was in shambles, and not because of the water. She seemed to be looking for something important by the looks of it. As she slammed another drawer shut, she turned around and saw Zane staring at her and immediately blushed. Zane averted his eyes, also blushing. He stared at his feet, trying not to make the situation any more awkward than it already was. Shit, he thought. Kawaii-chan, though, didn't wait a moment. Zane-kun, could you help Kawaii-chan find something? Zane fumbled with his words. What is it? Kawaii-chan sighed and turned to Zane, looking directly at the floor. It's a silver pennant, with a pink cherry blossom charm on it. Kawaii-chan has had it with her. She paused, gulping. All her life. She gripped her skirt, wrapping the fabric around her clenched fists. She clenched her jaws and shut her eyes tight. Zane could see her lips starting to tremble. Before she could start to cry, though, Zane remembered something. Kawaii-chan turned and leaned against the wall, knees pressed up against her chest. She fiddled with something silver in her hands. It reflected against the minimal light in the room, shining in Zane's eyes. What do you two even do anyways? The only thing you have in common is ponies. Question doesn't see how you could even be friends. That thing she had, that must be what she's talking about, Zane thought. Then he remembered her dropping it. He ran downstairs. Zane-kun? Kwai-chan brokenly called after him. She didn't follow though. Instead she sniffed, wiped her eyes, and set back to finding it. If anything, the whole conversation just made her more determined. She didn't need his help anyways, she thought. Meanwhile, Zane was tearing apart the living room. To be fair, it was already in shambles. He was just adding to it. He looked in every crevice he could think of, to no avail. The only thing keeping him going at this point was that he didn't want to just leave her up there all sad, though he wouldn't admit it, even to himself. I'm just trying to avoid her, he thought. I'm just searching for this thing to get away from her. Even he was having trouble convincing himself at that point. He kept searching and finally, he found the small piece of chain. The water from the flood must have really gotten to it, because it was tangled up in the insides of the couch. Zane worked carefully to try and untangle it, easier said than done. After probably 5 minutes of work, he finally got the necklace out of the inner workings of the couch. He took a moment to admire the piece of jewelry in front of him. It was simple and cute, though it had a touch of elegance to it. Though upon further inspection, he noticed something. One of the blossom's petals had completely split in half. Oh no, Zane whispered, holding the necklace in his hands. After a bit of searching, he found the other half, though it had a large scratch through it. That probably happened when it broke. Zane knew that Kwai-chan would be devastated, based on how she seemed to care for the jewelry, but she would be even more so if she never saw the necklace again. She had to know. Zane climbed up the stairs and stepped into Kwai-chan's room. She had her back turned to him, and she was looking at the bedside table, probably for the millionth time. He knocked, and she turned and looked at him. Her eyes were red and puffy. Zane-kun, Kwai-chan thought you left. She sniffed and shut her nightstand drawer. I found it. Kwai-chan turned so quickly that you might have thought she broke her neck. What? Are you serious? Let Kwai-chan see. She ran over to him, eyes shining brighter than Zane had ever seen them. The light was immediately put out when he laid her eyes on what Zane held out in front of her. When she laid her eyes on what Zane held out in front of her. Her fragile hands covered her mouth as her eyes started to well up with tears. Trembling, she took the necklace as her knees gave out. She fell to her knees and she released a sob as she held the chain in her hands. Shit, Zane thought. Why is it that the only person I've ever had to comfort was her? Zane looked down at the floor next to her, trying so hard to be comforting, though he was just too awkward to do so. Also, she was crying pretty freaking hard. After some ugly sobs, Kwai-chan turned and rested her head in the crook of Zane's shoulder. She didn't care who it was, she just needed to be held right now, and Zane's big comfy sweater was just perfect for the job. Zane at this point was blushing madly, and after the shock wore off, he wrapped his arms around her. They stayed like that for a while, holding each other until Kwai-chan's ugly sobs turned into soft, quiet ones. After a moment, she let go, immediately regretting leaving his body heat. She was still very close to him, but even so, he hugged onto herself. Zane was staring at her intently. She knew that even as she brought her hand up to look at the necklace again, touching the broken part softly with her other hand. This was Kwai-chan's mother's. What? Zane asked, puzzled. Kwai-chan just sniffed and stared at the necklace with swollen red eyes. What was she like? The Mifo took a moment before speaking. She was amazing, she softly spoke. Kwai-chan tensed and squeezed her eyes shut tight before finishing her sentence. Well, from what I've heard... What? Zane asked. What you heard? Don't you know your own mother? Zane immediately regretted what he said, watching the girl twitch and cringe. Shoot, Kwai-chan, I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have asked. He was cut off by Kwai-chan, placing a shaking hand on his knee. She looked up at him and tried to smile through her teary eyes. Zane blushed, looking down at the floor. Kwai-chan took her hand away and sighed. Kwai-chan is the youngest of 12, she started, and Kwai-chan's the runt. She breathed in like she was about to go on, but she stopped herself. We should probably start a little sooner. Kawaii-chan, you don't have to tell me this, Zane started. From the way you're sounding, you haven't told this story to anyone before, and I wouldn't want you to tell me this just because I'm here, I'm available. You should tell someone who knows you better, like Caitlin or Aphmau, or, someone you've lived with for a while, not just a dumb nugget like me. Though instead of responding, Kawaii-chan continued. Kawaii-chan's mother grew up in Japan. She lived there a large portion of her life, though for one reason or another, she decided to move to the US to teach Japanese to American children. After struggling for a bit, she landed a job teaching at a middle school a couple of towns over. Kawaii-chan doesn't know the details, but soon enough, she met Kawaii-chan's father, got married, and had Kawaii-chan's brothers. She paused. Everything was fine until Kawaii-chan came along. What do you mean? Zane asked. Mifwa are very traditional people. We have our own customs and ways of doing things. We have large families. We have births at home. And Kawaii-chan was a breach. Kawaii-chan's mother didn't make it. Kawaii-chan, I'm so sorry, Zane said. The broken girl hugged her knees closed and shut her eyes tight. Zane moved closer to her, taking her hand and giving it a tight squeeze. Kawaii-chan squeezed her eyes tight as tears made their way out of them. Kawaii-chan's father blamed her for her mother's death. He was distraught, he would yell and scream, and sometimes he would even... She paused, gulping. Hit Kawaii-chan, she sniffled. Zane was shocked. Hit her? How could anyone be so cruel as to hit her? And blaming her for her mother's death? She didn't deserve this. Kawaii-chan has been through a lot. She's sorry for pinning her problems on you, Zane-kun. Then Zane had a realization. Oh, my Irene, he spoke, beginning to freak out, letting go of Kawaii-chan's hand to run his fingers through her hair. He remembered the night of the flood, and he remembered grabbing Kawaii-chan's hand, and the look of terror in her eyes. The cupcake. Oh, my Irene. Kawaii-chan, I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have never... Kawaii-chan cut him off, grabbing his hand and squeezing it again. Zane-kun, you didn't know. That doesn't make it any better. Kawaii-chan looked up at him, shocked. He stared at the ground. I never should have... I'm so sorry. The two sat together for a moment, neither knowing what to say. After a bit, Kawaii-chan got up. Kawaii-chan? Zane asked as he watched her grab something from a box she had already packed. She sat back next to him, handing him a framed picture. It was for Mifwa, all with the same hair and eye color, smiling wide. The eldest one, Zane assumed it was her mother, was clearly pregnant, and they all looked so happy. Your family? Zane questioned. Kawaii-chan smiled. Sakura-sama, Haru-kun, Ryo-san, and Kaito-chan. In the middle. The only ones I have pictures of, unfortunately. Kawaii-chan held the picture gingerly, as if it was the only thing she had left. She didn't want to break their bond. What was she like? Zane asked. Do you know? The Mifwa smiled. Kawaii-chan's siblings would tell her. They said that she had the most kind smile, and if you were hurt, she'd pick you up and squeeze you tight and kiss you until you felt all full of belonging and love. Kawaii-chan rested her head on Zane's shoulder as she smiled at the picture. After being shocked for a moment, he rested his head on her own. They said she smelled of lemongrass and sleep, whatever that means, and she always carried apple juice boxes in case of, well, if any of Kawaii-chan's siblings got thirsty. She closed her eyes. She means everything to me. Huh? Zane questioned. What? Me. You said me. You slipped out a third person. Oh, Kawaii-chan, sorry. No, you don't have to apologize. Oh. Zane knew that Kawaii-chan felt uncomfortable, so he lifted his head and let her move away from him, though instead of letting her go, he looked her in the eye. Why do you speak in third person? What? Why do you speak in third person? Zane repeated. Oh, I mean, you don't have to answer if you don't want to. I was just, no, it's fine. No, it's not fine. It's a personal question, and I shouldn't have. I want to tell you. She did it again. Zane shut up and froze. Sorry. Don't apologize, Zane comforted her. Sorry, she chuckled. Then she began. Growing up with 11 siblings, she started, is hard, especially since, well, we have all the same hair and eye color. It's hard to be remembered when you're all the same. And one day I found this story about a super cute princess warrior named Kawaii Cookie, and I wanted to be just as cute as her. I wanted to be different. I wanted to be unique. Her voice quivered as she spoke, bringing her sleeve up to dry the tears from her cheeks. So I started doing just that, trying to be more cute, and people started to actually remember me, to want to get to know me, and it was amazing. After all of my life, a life full of cruelty, and... She got herself off as she started to sob once again. Zane was befuddled and appalled. How could a girl, such as the one in front of his eyes, ever hate herself? How could she be blamed for something beyond her control? He started tearing up, and he tried to hide it. Oh my Irene. He started to speak when Kawaii-chan started bawling once again. Kawaii-chan, come here. Zane opened his arms and let the broken girl fall into him, burying herself into his sweatshirt. Kawaii-chan, no one deserves to live like that. Especially not you. He held her tight as she cried, wanting to comfort her, but being unable to find the words. Kawaii-chan just wants to be happy, the girl wailed into Zane's arms. Hey, shh, he reassured her as he brushed her hair out of her eyes. Shh, it's okay not to be happy. Zane proceeded to hold her and shush her, whispering words of praise of her strength into her ear. After a bit, she became silent, just resting in his arms. They could hear everything at this point, the radio downstairs, the rest of the group telling the others to work faster, even down to the little things like the cherry blossom tree moving in the breeze of Kawaii-chan's open window. Zane was reminded of the last time he had comforted this poor girl. In the same room, the same tree was calming them both. Silently, they let go of each other. Zane wiped away her tears as she smiled, leaning into his hands. Zane smiled. Look at the blossoms, he started, catching her attention the same way it had the first time he used the line. Do you see them swaying? Kawaii-chan laughed at his repetition, realizing the similarities of the two times the lines were used. She looked up at Zane, her eyes shining from her tears. It's calming.